Good afternoon. This is Professor Amina Al-Din with Critical Talk, which is a production of Muslim Network TV. You can watch us on YouTube, Roku, Galaxy 19, and Facebook. Today's conversation, I actually can sit back and learn a lot from our guest today, is on spiritual abuse. A very sensitive topic, a much needed one to have a conversation about. And when we ask, what is spiritual abuse? Well, we've heard about it in the Catholic Church. And usually there, what's talked about is sexual abuse without the attendant conversation around the spiritual confusion and chaos that caused. Well, we're going to get to some of that tonight. But spiritual abuse is across religious and spiritual, but not religious communities. How does it happen? When does it happen? How do you know what spiritual abuse is what my experts are going to speak with you tonight about. First, I have Omer Bajwa, who's been with us before, and he's just such a dog. He every time we asked him to plumb his knowledge, he does. He is the director of Muslim Life at the chaplain's office at Yale. We also have with us Dr. Amina Darwish, who is the Muslim Life coordinator. Again, another stalwart on my programs who smiles through it all. And it is just very interesting to me because she mimics my path in life, who is also a PhD in chemical engineering. We also have with us Dr. Ingrid Matson, who was educated in Canada and the United States, which is where I met her years ago, even though we're both young chippies. And she is now the director of the Center for the Study of Islam and Christian-Muslim Relations.
That was my old gig at Hartford.
Yes, I'm reading the wrong thing. Knock me out. Professor of Islamic Studies, where?
I'm at Huron University College in London, Ontario. I'm back in Canada.
Exactly, and that is not in what I'm reading, but that's okay. You know, pre-COVID, we had a conference here, and I'm trying to remember what month it is, and I don't remember. But Dr. Matson held a kind of private conference. At first, I was ticked off, but then I really noticed it needed to be private because of what she was covering, and it could not, under any auspices, have been open to the public because it was about spiritual abuse. Mm-hmm. So, my first question, I have my own thoughts, but you all are the experts. What is spiritual abuse? Dr. Matson?
Well, my understanding of it, or my definition of it, is that spiritual abuse is the use of religious or spiritual knowledge, status, position, or authority in the pursuit of exploiting or abusing others.
Dr. Amina, you have something to add?
I mean, that's a beautiful definition, mashallah. I think just the word, like, one of the Arabic terms of dhulm is to put something in a place where it doesn't belong or to misuse something. So anytime a spiritual tradition is used for any purpose besides what it was intended for, be it for personal gain, be it for even if it's not for personal gain, but it's still not for the intended purpose of connecting people to their creator, it's a misuse of what the tradition was intended for.
Omar.
Those are excellent points. I have nothing really to add except to just what Dr. Amina said right before this, is that whereas Volm is putting something, misplacing something, right, is that we have sort of a, not exact counterpart, but there's the adab, the idea of a comportment, right? And part of adab, at least in literature, as well as in the ethics, is putting things in the right place. Right, the right word and the right sentence structure in a line of poetry, in a line of prose, as well as in the way we comport ourselves, is it beautifies things rather than makes things ugly. So I think that that's useful to add to the conversation.
Let me add one thing, and that is that for me, it is also a spiritual abuse when you don't know the context of the person sitting in front of you. And the resources and references that you draw upon have no relationship to them. Let me just add that one.
Mm-hmm.
But as we move along here, I don't know if you feel comfortable, Dr. Matson, talking about the conference. What it focused on, one of the women attending the conference was staying in my home, so I got a blow by blow. Well, I actually blew by blew her every time she walked in. Well, what happened? And where's the papers and all of this great stuff? But I still didn't get a fullness.
Right. Well, thanks for asking. So we gathered a group of people, and we invited a group of people to submit research for this conference. And this was under the auspices of the Horma Project. So the project that we set up and have been working on for a number of years to address this issue. Horma is the sacred inviolability of the human being. So that is what God has endowed every human being with, the sacred inviolability of their body, of their mind, of their spiritual being. And so we really want to focus and put at the center this horma of the individual, because if we don't believe that, like if we do not understand that our life together in community is for the purpose of honoring and uplifting and protecting each other and facilitating each one of our connection with God. If we don't understand that, then forget everything else, right? Like if we believe there's one group of people who's superior to others, then there's no point in even talking about this. But what I've discovered over the years in my over 3 decades as a Muslim living in Muslim communities is that if you ask anyone, is it okay to abuse people or abuse them spiritually? People will say no. I've come across so many cases where someone has been abused or exploited and people will be shocked, but then, you see the response is really problematic, more harmful, and you don't see anything change structurally. So what we wanted to do was to solicit research and perspectives that would help us understand this complex web of relationships that we're in, the differentials of power and vulnerability. What kind of barriers are there to uplifting that sacred inviolability of the people? And what is enabling abuse and exploitation? And it does not have to be deliberate. I mean, there are, deliberate and intentional ways, but there also can be ways where just by being incompetent, by being poorly trained, by not knowing the people, as you say, not knowing the people you're talking to or preaching to or teaching, they can be abused and they can be exploited. So it's very complex, and we want to make sure that we don't make the same mistake of just looking at it from a very narrow, like legalistic perspective, or even thinking there's a simple solution. Well, everyone should just adopt a code of ethics and it'll be okay, and ignoring all of these other dynamics. So we were really happy about the, the perspectives that were brought in.
Well, I don't know if either of you two attended this conference because I wasn't there, but I am excited about the work. I am real, and I'm gonna, even though she claims to be busy, push her in this work, which is so critical. We're going to take a 2-minute break. Please get your coffee, your tea, lock up your dog, get your water, and we'll be right back. This is Professor Amina Al-Din with Critical Talk, and I'm now getting ready to have a really spectacular few minutes with Omar Bajwa, Dr. Amina Darwish, and Dr. Ingrid Masson. We'll be right back.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an
Our neighbors don't
eye-catching
realize
message.
that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world?
You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Assalamu alaikum, back again with Critical Talk and Spiritual Abuse. One of the things that I find interesting is the United States and Canada are seriously multi-ethnic, multicultural communities. And one of the things, a girlfriend of mine that I met, who is from the original Champas but lives in California, well, she's sick of hearing about Arab stuff. Nobody seems to be or have taken the time to look at the philosophy or the things that Chinese Muslims have to offer, Malay Muslims or Indonesian Muslims, and needless to say, African American Muslims, because I am so hooked on Ingrid's notion of Herma that I want to expand it. I want us to be the community that seriously handles it before it gets to the courtroom. And having been in court trying to explain to judges, what does a Muslim man mean when he's talking about the Quran says I can beat my wife? I checked it with my imam. And then we don't have a criteria for imams. We don't have any vetting for the curricula that are being taught in the various seminaries. Seminary pops up every other day. And I'm saying, well, what are you all learning? And who's teaching what? Help me out here, Omar.
Oh, no, these are fantastic questions. And I want to defer to my friends and my teacher, Dr. Matson, in just a moment. From my perspective, the thing that I would add is that you're talking about systemic level problems, right? So I can't offer like one size fits all solution. But the thing that I will point out is, we're living in a moment right now in which it's talking about the empowerment of the community. And so what I would offer from my perspective is the idea of we have a multiracial, multi-ethnic community of Muslims in North America that's unique, that's unlike anywhere else in the world. And this is a time of really promoting, and it's not my idea, this is what I learned from my teachers, right, is seriously promoting the idea of Islamic literacy. The more we educate and empower our lay communities on what are actual competencies and criteria for effective spiritual community leadership, then the community can be in conversation. It can hold, these abusive, God forbid, but abusive authorities in check at some level. Is that if the problem is that we have sort of a flock of sheep that are they're naive to the point that if someone spouts off certain language, certain bona fides, that automatically that they're given unbridled power. And I think that whatever worked historically in the Muslim world, we're living in a different context, as you yourself said, and we have to take that into account for promoting Islamic literacy. So.
Amina?
Agreed. I mean, you brought up two really important ones. A a lot of and there's been a lot of abuse of, because I speak Arabic, therefore I'm more Muslim. Abu Jahl was Arab. It didn't do him any good. Abu Jahl was the pharaoh of his time. He was a horrible human being, and he probably understood the literary beauty of the Quran more than any of us. That it wasn't a criteria that made him in any way, shape, or form better than anyone else. And I just, when you see inconsistencies in people's character, it's really important that we do check people when they are making claims. I think the other one that you brought up is probably interpersonally the most common one that I've seen, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's seen this, of just using the religion as when you see cases of domestic violence, very often you see this abuse of the religion of, I can treat you this way and Islam has my back. And there couldn't have been a bigger lie on the face of the earth than to tell someone that you can mistreat them in the name of God. And how destructive it is to someone's spiritual well-being. It's horrendous. And part of what it does, part of the reason that abusers would do that, is to continue to isolate them from a community that otherwise would have supported them. I'm trying to take away all of the pillars of support that you have, be it your own spiritual well-being or a spiritual community that can actually help you and pull you out of a difficult situation. I'm trying to isolate you from them. And there's so many.
You know, that is one of the first things that happens to the person who's beginning to transition into Islam. I'm a one that hates the term convert. I've been fighting for years to dump it. The Christians can have that one. I don't like it. But is the demand that you change your name. I'm going to cut, it's like the height of abuse. I'm going to cut you off from your family. Any inheritance you may have, any past really good friends may not be named Muslims, but I'm going to cut you off from nieces, nephews, cousins. The whole kind of support that you can have begins there. But Dr. Madsen, how do we, I don't want to say get rid of, although I would like to say get rid of. I'm in a get rid of moment, because Trump is still messing here. But how do we provide the sheep with a healthy alternative that feels good? Because all of you know as well as I do that victims of abuse, especially domestic abuse, have such low esteem after being beaten physically, mentally, spiritually, the whole 9 yards. And they have hanging over them, you don't want to be cut off from whether you're transitioning to Islam, because now you have teeny tiny family, or you're in a large family and being cut off from them. How do we mitigate that?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many things, but let's begin with the person again, because people are socialized to be that way, okay? Even, I don't like the term sheep for human beings at all, even though I know there's a kind of benevolent idea that, well, there's a shepherd and there's the flock that they're governing. But we have to be very careful, because we have to go back to what are the God-given capacities that everyone has. We are, as Muslims, we don't believe in original sin. We don't believe that people are broken, right? We believe that people are born, every human being is born spiritually sound. And part of that spiritual soundness is a basic instinct or spiritual sense of wanting to be close to God and of knowing basic justice and injustice. Right. What's fair and what's not fair. It doesn't mean that we know everything right and wrong. No, we have revelation for that. But there is that basic sense. And what happens, and even the reported hadith of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, where he said that every human is born on the fitrah, and then they are turned by their parents into whatever religion they are. That includes different forms of Islam. Like, we as Muslims are drawing people away from their God-given fitrah sometimes, rather than helping them to constantly purify and restore it. And part of it is making them feel like they're useless, making them feel that they can't do without this or that person. An almost cultish practice of socializing them into the religion where we completely tell them to minimize, yes, cut off other relationships. Don't listen to their feelings or their sense of right and wrong, and so we are actually incapacitating them. So the first thing is to really restore our proper understanding and let people understand that they do have resources, that as a human being, they have been given resources by God. Some of those capacities may have been incapacitated or disabled because of experiences they had, experiences of neglect or abuse, misinformation, etc., but that they can restore those. And so any teacher, any parent, any spouse who is not telling you, I want you to be able to do this on your own, is not the right person for you. If they are working to create you to be more and more and more dependent on them, that is abusive. That that they're taking you down the wrong path. So it begins, the process of preventing this abuse begins with all of us restoring that. That is the true liberation of Islam. And then we're going to be able to see that anything that has ever happened with human beings, or is happening now, has happened in the past. And we look to the diversity of communities who have come up with all sorts of solutions. Like, we do not have to reinvent the wheel. We see in the past that communities always had processes of training, of oversight, of grievance. I have a whole folder of medieval manuscripts showing, some fake dervish or some corrupt scholar or some judge who used his power inappropriately, being paraded backwards on a donkey through the town square because they abused their authority. So I'm not saying bring back the donkey, but I'm saying that, that taking responsibility for the people we put in power is absolutely part of our tradition.
Well, I have.
Can I just?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Amina.
Can I just add that it's not just about putting the person in power, but as Dr. Matson said, to have a system in place to keep them in check. I feel like we have so many issues with the celebrity imam culture that at some point becomes idolatrous. When you're putting someone on a pedestal and saying that they are beyond reproach, that's just unacceptable. That is not a part of our tradition. Every person, no matter how much authority they have, is still human, and we need to treat them as such.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, and that'll be my fourth question. To come back to that, because I'm gonna put all three of you to work, and I'll take up the back part. One, women kinda mimic their moms in relationships, and if your mom is a passive person who thinks that the most important thing is to keep that marriage together, whether it's just her personal, I think it should, or it's, I don't want the people down the street to know I'm divorced, or any of the other myriad of things that come with divorce, often mimic themselves right into abusive relationships because they're unable to distinguish. Muslim women, because the pickings are few and far in between, and racism intervenes, so the world of Muslims is not open, also are very, very limited and squeezed into perhaps the kind of relationships that Dr. Matson's talking about. Number three, we've been talking about how to, I agree with you 17,000%, this culture of the celebrity imam. And fortunately, in some ways, unfortunately in other, after 50 plus years of trying to practice, let me not say practicing, trying to practice Islam, I have found that the culture grows. I have found more shakers of this, that, and I used to talk about the shakes, the shake, rattle, and roll. Now I got shaker, rattle, and roll. I have so many titles floating, and I'm saying, oh, what do you know? How could you at 23 know anything? But different thing. But we do have, and articles have been written. There's the cult of the white male imam, who's a sheikh. And I, it doesn't matter to me whether his name was a name, because I've said it to all of them. There's we have these names that we banty about in some interesting ways. The key is to provide an alternative. One person, although Ingrid was trying, and I think very successfully, in putting on this conference, is to take what we have learned and move it forward. And I'm doing a text now on Muslim healthcare professionals and COVID. And one of the things over and over and over again is the mental health status is getting flushed down the tubes. Domestic violence is over the top. Child abuse is over the top. Children who are able are leaving home because parents are bringing in relatives who've not been in the house into the house. And I guess it's to help them out or whatever. But the kids are being taught in other places, don't do it, right? I don't want to be the cause of anybody's death or vice versa. So all kinds of things are happening. So people are turning to this long myriad of webinars, seminars, part 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, not having any tools to distinguish them. One channel has Urdu people that even if you looked them up, you couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Another one has a bunch of dead Arabs. So how are you going to distinguish who works for you? Come on, experts, light me up.
I mean, whose responsibility is it in the community? Sorry, I'm not sure.
It's yours responsibility.
And this is part of the thing. Like, I don't understand the point where we decided we're learning our Islam from YouTube videos. Like, there has to be a give and take of someone that loves me, that cares about me, that is part of my community, that is helping me build and grow spiritually. And there's such a huge lack of those people in our communities, men and women, that can provide that for our community members, that they themselves can also get support from the same community. And I feel like part of the reason where our abuse happens is because what should have been put in place in the first place wasn't. There isn't a healthy community. There isn't leadership that is accessible and accountable to the community. There aren't people that we've invested in that are learned in our masajid that can actually provide this for our community members, that know that they have the community's back because they are part and parcel of the same community. Their success is the community's success.
Yeah, I would like to hear. Brother Omar talk about what it means for him to be a chaplaincy, because part of what I was hoping for when I worked at Hartford Seminary to establish the chaplaincy program, and what I always taught my students there, is that they had the responsibility for their professional life and for each other, and that it was no one else's. I mean, there's no bishop, there's no pope. If they don't take responsibility for the power that they have, if they don't set professional standards, if they don't put in place a system of correction for each other, who's going to do it? And there's so much power in having that pastoral relationship where you're really there for a specific community, and that's who you care about. But I'll tell you, with so many of the chaplains, what I often found was that the need in our community, or the desire for charismatic preachers, for charismatic teachers, for
we talked
stars,
about that, yeah.
you know, so often drew them away. And I would often remind them, like, what do you want to do? Do you want to just be traveling around, like giving speeches, or do you want to have relationships and form communities? So I'd love to hear Brother Ahmed talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Mattson. I'm literally everything you said, that I hope in the 12 years since I graduated from your program that I've been trying to do a modicum of that. But I mean, I think you said it so beautifully, is that ultimately it's about relationships. To me, that's the heart and soul of not just chaplaincy, but we're in the blessed month of Rabi al-Awwal. You know, one of the, and I've been talking about that with my community, you know, albeit virtually, but of the many beautiful prophetic traditions and the sunnahs, is that relevant to this conversation is the process of knew his community, right? He knew the people, he knew their concerns, he knew their anxieties, he knew what was going on in their lives, not just the inner circle, so to speak, but of, I mean, he was the Nabi of Allah, right? As he made the time and had the expansiveness of heart to do that. And that's our model, right? That's the exemplar we follow, and is to what Dr. Amina said as well before, is that it's a real thing. It's a real problem, this whole celebrity imam. And one of my friends said that one of the worst casualties of this whole celebrity imam culture that's been going on for 10, 20, Allahu alam how many years, is the local imam, like the no-name, quote unquote, imam that is sitting there teaching, you know, alif bata, and teaching people how to do wudu, and is people coming up to him after Jummah and saying, I need to talk to you about a personal problem, and that's making the time for the community. And so I think from my perspective, the best that we can do, and the chaplains that are my friends and colleagues, and the ones that I mentor, younger chaplains, is to just reiterate this message, is that if you're in this, and I will say this specifically to the male chaplains, is that if you're in this to get more YouTube followers and to become a charismatic teacher, please leave. We don't want you or need you in this field. Check your nafs, and check your intentions, but that is actually going to be disastrous to what our community in the profession of chaplains needs. So,
Well, you know, I think that we see the problem. We know the problem. I am seriously distressed by the number of seminary programs. I've been to Ingrid's when she was at Hartford, and then I was just raving to everybody, you know, and my girl, she's got it going here. Then I turn around and all of these programs sprout up. They're not truly Islamic studies. I'm not sure what they are. And even Ingrid and I have two different Islamic studies sets of things. But I think if we sat down, we could find that middle path and say, okay, here's a reasonable curriculum. But the celebrity is not always the chaplain. It's the imam. It's the teacher, especially women, who couldn't get a job anywhere else, who become the person at a place, and they don't know what they're doing. But we can go on about what the problem is. My gauntlet is, what are we going to do about it? I'm into, you know, I'm getting slightly younger by the day. And before I reach infancy, we gotta figure out, what are we gonna do? What can we have the mercy of being at home. We want to claim we have less time. That's not true. Okay? We have a chance to focus our time, right? Spiritual abuse is going off the charts. Do you remember all of the arguments? One imam here, I think he'll never speak to me again, was saying, well, Amina, what's your problem? And I said, well, you know, and I will name him, I don't have a problem. But I think it's pitiful that you're talking about the Sharia and fiqh when the city is shut down, fool. What difference does it make what the Sharia or fiqh say? Get on with the business of the alternative for your community. You know, I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to pay all the fines the city is going to let, because the idiots will come. And since I just met a llama, I'm going to skip over the sheep. I should have used sheep. Do you know how soft llamas are? Anyway, I think that, okay, we know there's an issue with curriculums. We can pull all, Omer, you studied with Ingrid, so you have her curriculum. But Ingrid also studied at the University of Chicago. One set of things. And they were under this consortium of schools who the feds sponsored, but where teachers did awesome jobs. I came through another place, Temple, which had just straight Islamic studies, but we also had to do language studies, the languages in which the Islamic resources went, you know, the French, the German, the Russian, for some, you know, it varied. Why can't we pick a time over this next interlude of quarantine and just at least pull the information together, see what we have, and figure out how to float it? We don't have to do the cancel culture stuff. We're not interested in the celebrity people. They can go on and maybe they'll even get as many votes as Kanye West. Who knows? You know?
I mean, these are very provocative questions, and I'll just throw two things out for consideration. I'd love to hear from the my co-panelists. Is that, you know, one is we're in an era of you know, we focus on micro community building, right? As much as these are macro level problems, but we really have to start from somewhere, and it's very much about starting with the micro. We're living in a time now where we have quarantine pods, we have families, loved ones that we've built, you know, a safe sort of zone, quite literally, with. And I think it's there. It's that's where you know, I have people and I have families in my pod where they are quite literally, they're looking after the welfare of my children, and they are entrusting me to look after the welfare of their children. And the masjid is not accessible for that space. So maybe we go back to this idea of micro community building amongst people that we love and trust, people of integrity that have our best interest in mind. I'll just put that out there, sort of a first step. And then the other thing is really reviving the tradition of mentorship. We are talking about curricula and syllabi, which are fantastic, but even the greatest curriculum isn't going to get you very far unless, one, you have a competent teacher, right? But then it's not just like, and I'm saying this to my teacher mentor, Dr. Mattson, you know, I think there's a role of a teacher and there's a role of a mentor. And oftentimes they can be the same person, but they can also be different people. Someone can teach you the subject, and someone else can actually mentor you, like in our idea of a murabbi, like someone that works on your personal, not just your intellectual development, but your personal development as well. And that's what I would put forward to my, you know, chaplaincy colleagues and students of the field, is that they need mentorship. They graduate and they just get thrown into the world without any real practical experience.
I think, can I just add also the peer-to-peer cultural support? And I didn't attend the Hartford Seminary. Dr. Mattson's not my direct mentor, but I've benefited from her work through the other chaplains that I've met. And there's a cultural change that came with that changed how chaplaincy is done. And I feel like for my group of friends and my peers that I'm working with, a lot of what we have to do is actually undo some of the spiritual abuse that a lot of our students experienced in the masajid. And trying to heal the spiritual trauma that they personally experienced. The number of women that came to me and said, I never knew Allah could love me. I never knew Islam could be for me. There's just unpacking so many layers. And I'm really honored and grateful to have a community like that. But I also probably would not have been able to accomplish that without the cultural change, without the community support of other peers that would do that. And alhamdulillah, it's to have peers to rely on, but also to be in communication with those same abusers. And I've done this with Umar and my other colleagues of, this person is an abuser, and they would get disinvited from all of our collective communities because we know what they're doing.
Very good. You know, we have to take a break, and I want to come back to that point. I know Ingrid is chomping at the bit over there. See it in her eyes. They're dancing. This is Professor Amina Al-Din. I'm with 3 experts, great folk, Omar Bajwa, Dr. Amina Darwish, Dr. Ingrid Matson, and our topic today is spiritual abuse, and we'll be right back.
Assalamu alaikum!
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. 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 And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam is and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is really smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Professor Amina Al-Din, and we're talking about spiritual abuse with Dr. Ingrid Matson, Dr. Amina Darwish, and Omar Bajwa. I want to go back to this idea of the micro community, the women especially, and I myself, and it's not a confession because I don't do confession, stop going to the masjid because I didn't become Muslim to sit in the back of nothing. And this Muslim world thing that people brought, I find offensive. I also agree that the prayer space is not a prayer for socialization. There's been no discussion on how you walk that line. So I've found many things in the Muslim community extremely abusive. To the little bit of spirit I got, it ebbs and wanes, flows, hills and valleys, whatever. But the idea of mentorship, I don't know, given the paucity in the African American community, one of the things that's being confronted now is a dumping of the immigrant community because it has been so bad for people spiritually. They have ditched their families and cut off ties. Mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts have died. Nieces, nephews, and cousins don't know them because their introduction to Islam was more of a Salafi Islam. They don't know you guys. They don't know that there are people who are working it out and are trying to deal with the various kinds of abuses. But Dr. Matson, I had to put that 2 cents in there, but you go.
Well, there are a few things I want to say. One is that spiritual abuse can be found anywhere, and it can be found in a micro community. It can be found in the home. When a parent says to their child, "You have to do this because God says you have to obey your parents,"
Right.
that's spiritually abusive. If a parent has the authority for a younger child to direct them in a certain way or stop them from doing harmful things, but I would say that in so many cases, unfortunately, and this happens in every home, it doesn't matter people's background, cultural background, or whatever, people use God, literally use God
for everything
to justify their position, right? Because what we do as human beings is we want to justify ourselves. So we look for the best argument. That means if you're an American, it's waving the flag. This is patriotic. If you're a religious person, you use God. If you're if you're an atheist scientist like Richard Dawkins, you come up with some scientific, pseudoscientific argument. That's what we do as human beings. And so I think, you know, the key is one of the keys anyways, and I really strongly believe that, is that there's a moral imperative to understand how human beings communicate, interact, and how our brains work. Like how we create these, how we fall into the same traps over and over again as human beings. Why are we attracted, you know, to those, why do we put people on a pedestal when we know we're not supposed to be worshiping idols? I mean, we literally have like Muslim idols, you know, we don't put the lights on them and high on the stage, and we put the, you know, a poster with stars around their face and everything, right? Why do we do that as human beings? Why do we, when we hear some news that is shocking or upsetting, why do we deny it? Our first reaction is it can't be true. Right? No matter what, whether it's we hear about abuse of someone or some news we don't want. So my, you know, what I believe is that in our educational programs, in our educational formation as religious people, we have to understand what it means to be embodied people. How do our bodies work? How do our minds work? How do we work in social groups? What are the things that trip people up again and again and again? Because if we know that, it doesn't mean we're always going to, you know, we're not going to fall into that, but at some point we can maybe recognize it and we can put in those systems in place. So this is where I really feel, you know, just so that I've benefited so much from many, many different kinds of communities. I'm always learning. I'm always open. I'm trying to learn from scientists and psychologists and therapists and neurologists. And like I take, just for my Horma project, I've taken a couple courses and training in things that I didn't know about. So, you know, we can have all of the language, all the linguistic training and history and everything. And those things can be really important in just having a certain knowledge base. But there needs to be much more, and it needs to be ongoing, because this is the amazing thing that God created us with these tremendous capacities for growth and knowledge and change and connecting with others. And if we do that, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he created this way. Why? Lita'arafu, right? So it's this mutual knowledge and understanding. And that's how we should think about our lives and community. And it can only be possible if we are really open to listening to people, if they have space. If they're shut away in one room or another, how are we going to hear? How are we going to communicate? How am I going to see if I'm speaking and I say something that hurts you, if you're not even in the same room, how do I even know that you're hurt? I can't. The Prophet Muhammad said something, he could see the faces of the people he was talking to and preaching to. We need that.
Well, I think, you know, people are getting more used to the Zoom, the Skype, the whatever it is. And I'm wondering, how can I use this platform to continue these conversations, to add to people to the conversations, because I know that they will come. And if the three of you, Amina always looks at me with a little smirk when I say we'll be willing to come back at some intervals so that you can get your peace and quiet, but also this Ingrid is teaching, Amina's got office hours, as does Omar. If you could send me and my producer a list of available times, because we're going to really need some spiritual upliftment after this election is finally over. And people need some direction. The protests are beginning today here in Chicago. So there are loads of things where people need some settling, you know, some attempts at balancing. So if all of you are willing, say yes, please.
Yes.
You got my best please with a smile. Then I would love to have you back. We have to get out of the way of another program, but I want to thank all of you. God knows I thank you, and I pray for your health and well-being and that of your families. This is Professor Amanal Dean with Omar Bajwa, Dr. Ingrid Masson, and Dr. Amina Darwish talking about spiritual abuse, and we'll do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.